Sir, give me this water. But it's not that simple. He can't just automatically give her the water, this living water himself, because she's still sinning. And so he needs to bring her to an awareness of her own sins. She's trying to hide from herself the sins she's in, and she's trying to hide from the neighbors. That's why she's coming at noontime. Everybody else is being sane and sleeping or taking a siesta over the high, hot time of the day and not going to the well to get any water. But she is, because she's greatly sinned. And so Jesus, in talking to her, reveals to her that he knows her sins. He knows that she has been married multiple times, 5 times, and she's living with another man. She's not even married to this one. And she is shocked that he knows all of this about her. But interestingly, Father Gately says she doesn't get angry. Instead, she recognizes that Jesus is a prophet. And we're not talking about any prophet, the prophet. Because the thing that is amazing is that the Samaritans didn't follow any of the teachings of the prophets. They ignored them. They did follow the commandments, but they did not follow the prophets' teachings because they were waiting for the prophet to come. And here he is in front of her, and she recognizes that. So she's not angry, she's astounded. And she is astounded because it's obvious that he cares about her. He wants to forgive her sins. He wants to give her this living water. And she's overwhelmed. And that's why she runs back to her village and yells and knocks on the door, wakes up the people through her sins. She's finally willing, they already know about her sins, but she's never been willing to face her sins herself, let alone talk to other people or be humiliated by them when they talked about her. But now she's willing to use her forgiveness of her sins by God to wake them up, to get them to go to Jesus so that he can pour the same living water into them. In particular, as Catholics, how much we have been given with all the sacraments. Confession, and particularly the Eucharist. Right now, the Eucharist is gone from many of us. The doors of the church are closed. We're not allowed to receive Jesus. Is this a fluke? No. It's because we Catholics, the last Pew study showed that I think less than 25% of Catholics believed that Jesus was truly present in the Eucharist. How God must sorrow that his gift has been thrown back at him. So when we sin to that degree, God, you could say, abandons us. No, he doesn't abandon us. But he lets us be alone in the realization of our sin, so that we will come to appreciate his gift in the future. So right now, we should be praying, pleading to God, to the Father, to let this coronavirus be dissipated so that we can open the doors again, so that we can receive Jesus himself into our bodies. There's no coincidence that this has happened now. This is God calling us back, calling us like the woman at the well or her neighbors, calling us back to realize the gifts that he is really given us freely. And we should be sharing these gifts, this knowledge of these gifts. When you really understand and appreciate and thank God all the time for these gifts, then you should just yearn to share that with your neighbors. Because when you really appreciate and use these gifts, how much easier life is, how much more joyful and peaceful, even in the midst of suffering, that life is. Wow. So pray hard during this time. In particular, we should be entering into a dialogue more often with God. And again, I've said this in the past, but we need to look at the amount of time that we're spending in a day and divide it fairly. And by fairly, just like the commandments, first 3 commandments put God first. Did you spend Sunday on the TV or on the computer, but watching a live streaming of the Mass? I heard some numbers in our own parish and I was kind of shocked. There weren't the numbers that should have been listening to the live Mass. Now there's a lot of them being offered, so maybe the majority of the people were going elsewhere. But this is the time that you can't give up the Mass. You must put yourself and abide in the Mass and be able to hold on to that gift. And even though you can't receive Jesus physically, you can make a spiritual communion. Jesus came to St. Alphonse Liguori at one point, and he showed him 2 chalices, one gold one and one silver one. And the gold one was filled up with the hosts that St. Alphonse Liguori had received, all the times that he had gone to the Eucharistic Mass and received the actual body and blood of Christ. The silver one didn't have as many hosts. And so St. Alphonse Liguori asked Jesus, "What is the silver one?" And Jesus explained that the silver chalice was the number of times that St. Alphonse Liguori yearned to receive Christ and couldn't. And so that he made a spiritual communion. You can make a spiritual communion as many times during the day and evening as you want. We should be filling up our silver chalices with yearning for Christ and make that spiritual communion. So don't neglect the Mass. You have the ability now to see it every day. Maybe you were working before and you couldn't take time to go to Mass, and maybe now you have the ability to do that. Or maybe the kids were too crazy at home, and so after you put them to bed, you can listen to a Mass and make that spiritual communion with Christ. Okay, we're going to take just a short break, and we're going to come back with day 7, the woman caught in adultery.